What can history tell us about this matchup this weekend between New Zealand and South Africa? I was thinking about it and thinking, do you know what? I have been at the last three New Zealand v South Africa matches. I was at the Rugby World Cup final in Paris, 28th of October, 2023, an unbelievable night. And it was off the back of chatting to Kiwi and South African fans during the Rugby World Cup and hearing them talk about the rivalry that made me want to come and sample it in the Rugby Championship. And that's why I was in South Africa last year to watch the games in Johannesburg and Cape Town. And they were incredible as well. I wish I could be in Eden Park this weekend, but that's another story. But what I did do is go back and look at my report on full time, my thoughts on the matches following the game, just to see where the two teams were then and what's changed and what's the same. And it's quite interesting. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the chat down below. Give the video a thumbs up, hit subscribe. Make sure you join me following the game tomorrow when I'll have a report on the final whistle, try and kind of capture that excitement and atmosphere that there's going to be, because this game is hyped up so much. But what can history tell us? Firstly, the matchup between the two teams, it's 62-42 to New Zealand. There's been 4 draws in their history, 108 games in total. 32-10 is the record of New Zealand in New Zealand. They have had a far superior record on home soil. However, South Africa, who are 28-25 at home, have won the last 4 games between the two of them as well. And the last win for New Zealand was back in 2023 in the Rugby Championship at the Mount Smart Stadium in Auckland. Since then, we've had the absolute drubbing at Twickenham of the All Blacks before the World Cup final, and those 2 games last year. And one of the comments earlier in my video described this fixture as our Super Bowl. For All Black fans and Springboks, this is their Super Bowl. Well, do you know what? In rugby terms, it could well be the greatest show on turf in 2025. So I had a look at what I said following those games last year, as I say, to see what's changed and what's the same. Last year, Cape Town, the last time these two teams played each other, 18-12 to the Springboks on that day. And in my video following that match from the Cape Town Stadium, which you can go and see, it's in the feed right now. But in summary, I said, quote, "Small moments feel like really big moments." And that is always the case in the biggest and most intense matches. And it's why experience matters. It's why the top 2 inches is so important. Just being able to handle those big pressure moments and execute all those times you do it in training. Can you take it out onto the park and execute when there is a game on the line? And I just can't help thinking that muscle memory that South Africa have of being in those positions and handling it could be really, really influential this weekend. And then when you look at some of the guys that are in the New Zealand team, Simon Parker, second test match, Billy Proctor still bedding in, Finlay Christie, 4th choice scrum half, back in the fold. For South Africa, yes, there's Ethan Hooker, he's on the bench, there's Fabian Holland on the bench. South Africa have more caps, they have more times when they can look to the well. Where if it's not going their well, if it's not going well, they can get together in a huddle and they can say, "We've been here before," and they were last year against New Zealand. I also said, talking about South Africa's attacking approach on that game in Cape Town, 18-12, so it was a really tight game, 1-score match. I said about South Africa, I'm not 100% convinced. Is it playing to South Africa's strengths to play this way? The line-out was poor. They've done it and they've got another win, and it will serve them well if they can develop another way to play by 2027. It's the same situation, isn't it? I could be describing the South Africa team right now. They're in the same situation where they're clearly trying to find different ways to play so that they arrive in 2027 a complete team that can take on any opposition and can have selections and tactics which match the needs for that particular game. But what I would say is it doesn't feel at this precise moment in time like South Africa have taken giant steps forward in that way of thinking. It hasn't taken giant steps forward in the last 12 months. And that is good. That is one of the challenges. Can they break through? I mean, you would say this game is a bit more of a one-off Feels a little bit more kind of World Cup finale, doesn't it? The record at Eden Park on the line and all the rest of it. It's just been hyped up so much. It feels like that. And Hondre Pollard and Villy Leroux starting makes it feel like this could be being treated tactically as a bit of a one-off by Rassie Erasmus. But then again, you've got Sasha Feinberg and Gomzulu on the bench. You've got Ethan Hooker there. So you've got Ruan Norkia. And I mentioned that the line-out was not great in Cape Town last year. Ruan Norkia, that may be the reason he's not there. Imagine being able to leave out RG Snyman. He would start in... Would RG Snyman start in every other international team in the world? I think he probably would. Maybe France would have him on the bench as well, because Thibaut Flamont is pretty amazing. But other than that, he'd start for every other international team. He's not even in the 23. It's remarkable, but that could be why. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the Cape Town game last year, it feels like things are quite similar. What I did say after that game last year was South Africa could get to a place where they are a Swiss Army knife of a team. Still nearly 2 years till a Rugby World Cup. Well, there is 2 years till a Rugby World Cup. And they'll take a massive amount of confidence if they can win this one. But are they going to keep to the development tactically, or are they going to go back to more classic box style to win a one-off game? That's going to be the really interesting thing. What I said about New Zealand in this Cape Town test, New Zealand were valiant. They were very good. But they do not have a 23-man squad to beat South Africa, at least not away from home. South Africa Scott Robertson left 3 players unused on the bench. He does not have confidence in his squad overall. That is what I said last year. It's really interesting, isn't it? When you look at the squad, I know there'll be New Zealand fans nervous about Finlay Christie being there and not having Cam Roigard, which would massively level up their team. Still unsure about the Billy Proctor, Geordie Barrett combination. Wanted Rico Ioane on the wing, but now he's on the wing. He hasn't looked himself. Will Jordan looked a little bit all at sea because Sevu Reece didn't really give him the help. Narawa may help that, but Caleb Clark would be in, you'd think, if he was fit and firing, but he's not available right now. So again, that confidence in the 23 overall, although I do think New Zealand have taken steps forward with Fabian Holland, with Simon Parker's coming in. He's been given a start in his second test. That's a big vote of confidence. Could you see players in the New Zealand 23-man squad, like in Cape Town, not getting onto the field? Because I was looking at it and I was thinking, I could imagine that Duplessis Karifi may well not get on. He could get 0 minutes. It depends on how match fit Wallace Satiti is, but Razor has been bolder with his selections, so that is a step forward. And there would have been a temptation to go back, slot Rico Ioane back in at 13, put Bodie to 15 maybe, and put Jordan on the wing. But he has stuck to his guns. Should he have gone back? It's an interesting one. I also say, to finish off Cape Town, New Zealand's turnover ability is deadly. Almost all the points came from breakdown turnovers. It is going to be fierce in this one. I said South Africa will not want to get too loose. And Australia, if you think about that defeat in Johannesburg, Australia were going or South Africa were going coast to coast in that first 20 minutes, and they were scoring loads of tries. But when Australia worked it out, South Africa were getting exposed and too short at the breakdown, and Australia won penalties. South Africa will not make that mistake in this one. And I'd say, in summary, not a lot has changed in a year. South Africa are still trying to transition the way that they play. New Zealand needs some of those inexperienced players to become inexperienced players. So it's as you were. That is Cape Town last year. Let's look at Johannesburg then. Another incredible game. 31-27 it finished. And South Africa were 10 points down going into that final quarter. New Zealand would have been kicking themselves that they lost that game from a really strong position. And here's what I said following that match. What do you take from that as you look ahead to this game in Auckland? I said, quote, New Zealand played such a smart tactical match. They have to ask themselves, why couldn't they close it out? And again, that comes back to that muscle memory of having been in the situation of winning tight games. South Africa have got it. New Zealand need to rebuild that feeling of invincibility. Maybe the Eden Park factor will help them with that one. The confidence that they will take from running out at that place with that atmosphere and with history and all those legends that have pulled on that jersey. Many of these players, obviously none of these players have ever been beaten at Eden Park. And I wonder, will that just give them a little extra something? If they're trying to build that feeling of invincibility, will the fact they are walking out into the spiritual home of New Zealand, where they have the most amazing record, a record that will probably never, ever be challenged, maybe as long as rugby has ever played, that could give them a little bit of special sauce, don't you think? That could make up for the fact South Africa have that absolute top 2 inches mentality that they can win whatever the situation in a game. In this match, D-Mac was fly half, but he was very rarely the first receiver. And there were loads and loads of varied kicks that New Zealand were getting to the edges because they had such variety in their play. They were kicking. That meant South Africa were dropping their back 3 back, and that left spaces on the edge, and they were able to get it down the edge. It worked really, really well. The backs for New Zealand are not as fluent this year as they were last year. And that is one of the limitations. A lot of people have pointed to the coaching team that Scott Robertson has got around him, and it's too forward-oriented, and they need to develop their back play. And isn't it interesting that there's a Kiwi looking after the evolution of the Springbok attack as well? But that they do have rugby brains in that team. And you saw it in Johannesburg last year. Geordie Barrett, Bowden Barrett, Will Jordan, D-Mac off the bench on this occasion. But those are 4 incredibly clever rugby players. Now, in that game, it started with Sasha and Reinach, 9 and 10, and it was Grant Williams and Hondre Pollard on the bench. This time it's flipped. It's Williams and Pollard starting, and Reinach and Sasha on the bench. And I wonder if Rassie maybe has looked back at these games and gone, we're a little bit too loose early. We gave them edges. We need a smarter kicking game, and then it will open up at some point, and that's when Reinach and Sasha can just bring their express pace onto the field. Secondly, I say New Zealand is playing, and this is the Johannesburg Test match, New Zealand is playing more classic Test match rugby. New Zealand played percentage rugby. And that's what got them in a position where they were 27-17 up, playing good quality Test match rugby. Good set piece, getting them all going, kicking really intelligently, and then when it was on, dropping the hammer and taking the opportunities, being clinical, which is what you always think about New Zealand. When you think about New Zealand, and with Richie McCaw as captain, Dan Carter in the team, and all those legends, 2008 to 2015, you knew what was going to happen. It was very much like South Africa. New Zealand were down on the scoreboard, and you never felt like they were out of it. And quite often, they wouldn't just come back and win late. They would come back and score 30 points in the last 20 minutes and just blow teams away. They'd absorb everything you've got and then blow you away because they were the most clinical team maybe that we've ever seen play the game. This New Zealand team can be clinical. They're going to need to be. I said, quote, South Africa got their tries towards the end when they reverted to a more classic Bok style. Interesting. Difference between Australia, round 1, round 2. South Africa went a little bit more back to classic Bok style. And I just can't help feeling that, and chatting to a lot of South Africans that I was there during those Australia tests, they're open to the development of the South African game, but they don't want to go too far away from that classic blueprint and abandon what has won them 4 World Cups to this point. And then I think I finished this video in Johannesburg saying, at home, New Zealand might be able to flip it their way, or do they actually need to open up a little bit? Well, that is a question I don't have the answer to. Tactically, this is going to be fascinating. I think it's going to be tight and it's going to be tense. And I think looking back over those games from last year, what it really says to me is, as much as you can focus on, is Billy Proctor and Geordie Barrett really bedding in? Is the back 3 good enough? New Zealand have got some absolute world-class rugby brains in their squad that can manage big moments in matches. What South Africa have is lots and lots and lots of players who can manage big moments in big matches. They've got more of them than New Zealand. And I think it is going to come down to that top 2 inches, that mentality. Who's going to execute under pressure? Can the South African feeling of invincibility from having gone to the well and been there before and been down on the scoreboard and managed to find a way to win, is that going to be balanced by the feeling of invincibility of Eden Park and all of those wins in that ground and the unique atmosphere that stadium generates? It's going to be unreal. And hopefully a little bit of a dive into a couple of the games that I feel very, very privileged to have been at might just get you thinking about how this game might go. I'd be really interested to know what you think. Let me know.